do apologize for being late, but some things out of my control. One of which being the there we go, that's better. So anyway, as I was saying, I ended up having some things out of my control. Oh, excuse me again for a second. Ow. Anyway, as I was saying, some things out of my control, one of which being the weather. I was waiting for it to warm up a little bit more, maybe get a bit sunnier so that I could take the table saw outside and do some work. Unfortunately, not going to happen. They say you should sandwich bad news and good news together. So, good news, I actually need to put some more glue on the candle holder anyway. I have some voids that I need to fill, which I didn't expect and didn't think I would have. Unfortunately, I underestimated the amount of glue I was using. Bit of a running gag if you were in my class in cabinet making, the amount of glue I use. Generally it was far too much. This time turned out to be far too little. And plus, I think clamping upside down made a big difference. A lot of the glue didn't stay where it was supposed to, and instead ran down the candle holders, so I will have to clean that up as well once everything else is done. The gluing went well. It's definitely set solid. What else have I got going on? More bad news. And it's an upside downside thing. Bad news, unfortunately, because of the likely cost of shipping, I will not be doing the sword project, that one there, for Christopher Everard. After all, I'm very disappointed myself. I know Chris is unhappy about it as well. But I would very much have loved to have done that, especially having picked up some cedar to begin the work. Upside, I now have cedar to do something else. So what I will probably be doing with the cedar is finding a softer wood to laminate with it, and probably be making some Western style boken out of that. What else is going on? Not a heck of a lot. Please go and check my Odyssey. That will be linked below in the description, or in the description. No, actually it probably won't, because what is it there? Or an ingrown hair, probably. Plucked an eyebrow out of there. Swear to God, I'm going to end up plucking all these eyebrows out too one of these times. It doesn't start settling down. Anyway, yeah, so I'll be making some boken. My Odyssey is now, how did they phrase it in the email? Which, for the record, Odyssey is kicking YouTube's ass on creator notification. YouTube still hasn't sent me any sort of notification that I can stream mobile. I just happened to discover it. Oh, hi, Earl. Just had to cut the blonde ones out of my eyebrows. I don't cut my eyebrows. I will occasionally trim them, but I never cut them. And yes, my fat ass is eating a chocolate bar. Because it's 3 in the afternoon. It's a cloudy day and I feel tired. So I'm going to nibble a little bit. I'm also about to... Oh, well, I guess that's stuck to the bottom of my cup. I guess I had a bit of a spill. I do like Odyssey. And I'm definitely appreciative of the fact that they made me aware that I could sync and monetize my, or rather, I could sync my YouTube. Red Bull, oh god, no, Red Bull is disgusting. And there's a chemical in Red Bull and a lot of energy drinks called taurine. And taurine is used as a heart medication. It's used to increase and decrease your heart rate. Back when I was bouncing, which is about 20 years ago, there was a fashion for Red Bull and vodka, which I imagine is still a fairly popular drink. I'm actually going to sit down and do this. Give me just a second here, folks. I might as well sit and have my smoke while I'm talking to you guys. There we go. Well, a lot of people don't drink it for the taste. But, yeah, I have, being a person of girth, I tend to avoid energy drinks in general, high sugar, and the taurine content. I tend to avoid sugar in almost all forms. The only thing I have that's sugary is the occasional chocolate bar. I don't even put sugar in my coffee anymore. Hey, I didn't say they were bad for everybody. I'm saying this is why I don't drink them. But I'm concerned about the effect that taurine would have on my heart. That's all. And I have seen negative effects from overuse. The Red Bull and vodka guys were generally the ones who wanted to fight the most as well. That's partly because there was I think it was a roughly 6-to-1 ratio men to women in the town that I was in, single men to single women, in the town that I was living in when I was bouncing. Yeah, so, I mean, guys can't get their energy out one way, they'll find another. And not a lot of guys want to dance either by themselves or with other guys. And yes, I know the cigarette is bad for me. But then so is the coffee, so is the woodworking, so is probably wearing cotton. At this point, I just don't care. There's only so many things I can stress about, and I've picked the few that I'm willing to chance. So yeah, my Odyssey channel is synced to my YouTube, so if you want to catch my content and potentially throw me credits or lemons or whatever their crypto is over there, feel free. Yeah, you know the worst thing about life? Nobody gets out of it alive. But talking about that brings up the idea of quality over quantity. Now, it is potential that I could live to be 120. That's the potential. The likelihood, on the other hand, is quite low. And chasing that potential number would leave me watching my diet obsessively, never indulging in any vices, sugar, tobacco, caffeine, any of those. Never, I'd have to watch my sleep pattern obsessively. I'd have to see a therapist all the time to make sure that I wasn't stressing. Yeah. Gotta be honest. Given the choice between, spending all of my time surviving and only surviving. Yeah, I've never really been the I want to live forever sort. Now, I have been in my 20s. I was very much in the I'm going to live forever, the hell with it, who cares, nothing will stop me. Uh, that particular attitude has mellowed over the years, um, especially with the benefit of a terribly bad knee. Um, but other than that, I'm going to else did I want to talk about? So anyway, as usual, this is an AMA if you want to ask me anything. I think it's just me and Earl at the moment. Don't even bring up knees now. Mine is hurting. Yeah, I know, right? When your mind's taken out of it. Um, but one of my neighbors is an elderly fellow, and he's repeatedly pointed out to me that I seem to be in worse shape than he is. He's, I believe, pushing 80. And he's said to me a couple of times, "You're in worse shape than I am, and I'm twice your age." And I've pointed out to him that it's not the years, it's the mileage. I've been woodworking since I was a kid. It was a hobby. When I got tired of trying to uh, beg the government after 5 years on welfare, substance abuse issues and various things have screwed up my life. Uh, but once I got tired of begging the government for help, that just clearly was not coming after 5 years, I took out a student loan in 2019 and actually went and did a woodworking course. Now, before this, I've had jobs where I've worked in cabinet shops and I very much enjoyed it. Uh, but I've been making things out of wood since I was a child. It's a very common thing, or was a very common thing in Newfoundland to make your own toys and things like that sometimes. Um, I think the biggest impetus for it is the fact that I actually find that I thrive. Excuse me. I find that I thrive when I have an actual physical uh, embodiment of an achievement. When I can actually stop at the end of the day. Sorry, I've got a lot of gas from the coffee all of a sudden. Um, but I find that when I can stop at the end of the day and look at something that I've actually done, I find that my self esteem and my sense of achievement is much higher than if I was writing code or even writing a book. Um, I do a little bit of writing, nothing that I feel particularly comfortable publishing at this point. I have self-published a short story in the past on Amazon. Uh, it didn't perform well, and about a year after I posted it, I ended up pulling it down when one of the people who had read it pointed out that there was what appeared to be a continuity issue. It was a very minor issue, and uh, just slipped past me in the editing process. But it was embarrassing enough that I didn't feel like leaving it up. Well, see that, and you're right, Earl. It does feel good at the end of the day when you work with your hands to see something you've done. Uh, but there's also the fact that I think there's a certain uh, type of person who really thrives on that. And I mean, if that's where your sense of achievement, your sense of accomplishment comes from, by all means, chase it. If you're the kind of person who can sit in an office cubicle all day, oh, I still write poetry and music. I can't read music. I write lyrics. I can't sing worth beans either. But I think every young man actually goes through a period of writing poetry, um, whether it's to impress a girl or just to get our angst out. Um, anyway, the story ended up coming down. Uh, you're talking about ADHD. Yeah, now I've completely forgotten what the hell I was talking about. Squirrel. But one of the big things for me, like I say, is that sense of fucking fly. Yeah, come closer. Okay. Anyway, he's hidden in the shadows now. I can't get him. Uh, yeah, I've been reading poetry ever since one of the Flash comics actually introduced me to. Didn't get him. Hi, Kingdoms. Nice to see you. Um, yeah, I've been reading and writing poetry since I was probably 8 or 9, probably 10, maybe in that range. There was a Flash comic that had a copy of Rudyard Kipling's "If" in it, and I spoke about that, I think, yesterday on my stream, and absolutely and thoroughly enjoyed that. Um, while I'm thinking about it, not that I'm going all squirrel again, Flanders Fields is another really good poem. Uh, that's one I actually read last year for Remembrance Day. I have to stop and process what the day is called in different places. Canada, it's called Remembrance Day. When I was a kid, it was still called Armistice Day, and that's still kind of the default name amongst the older folks, because we have a Memorial Day here in Newfoundland on July 1st because of the Battle of Beaumont Hamel, uh, where a bunch of the Newfoundland Regiment were killed in the First World War. Um, anyway, while I'm still talking and losing my train of thought completely, I might as well start working on this candle holder a little bit. So let me bring this back up and come on over here. I would appreciate it if you guys would, I call it A-Day for you Canadianists. I'm not a Canadianist. I'm not even really all that fond of being called Canadian, to be honest. But what I have to do now, because I have some voids in the bases, and I'll show you one of the really bad ones. Let me see. Yeah, you should be able to see that void over here. Let me see. There we are. You can see the void right there. That's where the glue basically just ran right out along the edge, because I'd made the mistake of gluing them upside down. Such things happen, but not such a big deal. You'll wonder why I have a plastic baggie, and if you know what a piping bag is, you'll understand in just a second. But first, I need my glue, and I need some light. And while I'm at it, I might as well grab my apron. The apron isn't really necessary for this, but as someone pointed out before, it's kind of like a uniform. Put it on, go to work. Get my shirt tucked into my pants here. There we are. So yeah, it's kind of a case of I put on the apron and I'm in that work frame of mind. Lets me focus more on what I'm doing. And I won't need that piece of cardboard for this, so I can use the newsprint. The reason there's a piece of newsprint under it, safety third, glue is always pain in the nuts. Newfie is something of a pejorative. I would prefer you call me a Newfoundlander. The reason being that quite often when people call me a Newfie, they generally, or when mainlanders, people who aren't from Newfoundland, use the term Newfie, they tend to apply the adjective goofy to it ahead of time. And to be honest, these days I can't say I necessarily blame them, but I don't like having the adjective applied to myself. Now, okay, you guys can't see what I'm doing here. There we are. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut a very small chip out of the corner of this plastic bag to use it for piping some glue into those voids. I'm hoping that'll work. If not, I'll have to come up with something different. That should be sufficient. Just 1 second here. Okay, that'll work better. There we go. Now we have pretty good airflow out of there. So, all I'm going to do is dump a fairly small amount of glue into the bottom of this bag. That should be plenty. wipe that off later. And I should be able to pipe this as if I was working a cake. Yes, okay. Let me move my work over here so you guys can actually see what I'm doing. And bend. Actually, I can throw that down for a second because that's not actually going to run. That glue is fairly viscous. And I'll just bring this right down on top of what I'm doing. Now, let me see. Okay, there you go. You can see the voids I'm going to be filling here. And I'll start from one side and work to the other. While this won't look as pretty as what I wanted, it will at least be seamless when I cut it with the chisel. Okay. And I'm fairly certain I've seen at least a couple of chats go by out of the corner of my eye. I will get to them. Give me just a few minutes. That's awkward. There we are. The good thing about wood glue is it's a fairly forgiving material. So you can kind of get away with doing... Oh, get in there. There we are. Now normally I wouldn't make that much of a mess, but considering I'm going to have to cut a lot off or chisel a fair bit off later anyway, I'm not that concerned with it. I just want to be sure there's no big gaps in there. I need to get the air out of there. There we are. Okay. And the reason I don't want air in there is because, well, it'll poof and burp like the end of a mustard bottle or a ketchup bottle when you give it those last few squeezes before you put the bottle away, or put the bottle in the garbage rather, or maybe you recycle, I don't know. Let's see, bit of a void there to be filled. Okay, and I'm being a little bit of a overdoing it perfectionist on this. Because I do take great pride in my work, but I also know that sometimes you have to surrender to the realities of the conditions you're working in, and sometimes that just means you make do where you can. And this isn't unlike applying icing to a cake, so I do apologize for working where you guys can't see. Oh, hang on, let me come back here so you actually can see what I'm doing. Get that part now, and come around here. Come on. There we go. One of the other things that's good about this particular glue is that when it's heated with body heat, it becomes a little more aqueous, a little less viscous, which means it's flowing a little better. So that should mean it flows into the cracks, the voids that I'm trying to fill pretty well. Okay, I think that's about it. So now what I have to do is let that dry. So that's probably another 24 hours. And actually, I'll go this way because I'm going to sit down again. So now all I have to do is let that dry for another... Oh, come here. Damn chair. So what I'll do now, I'll let that dry for another 24 hours. And then I will be essentially taking a chisel and slicing just underneath it. Look at that, you get a woodworking stream and a bit of mukbang. But what I'll be doing is I'll be slicing just underneath with the chisel, and that'll take up most of it. Then I'll take a little bit of sandpaper and smooth it. Oh, that's right, I forgot to take that off. That's interesting. What you're about to see me do, I highly recommend you don't do at home. I've been playing with knives almost as long as I've been woodworking. And just to illustrate what I was talking about for the ladies, that's what it looks like when you start to peel it off. That's not skin, that's just glue. And I should also point out that I'm not doing this with a razor sharp blade. I'm doing this with my fairly dull scraping blade. Which isn't to say I couldn't cut myself. It's just to say that the blade is not likely to cut me in the angle that I'm using it, because I'm drawing it in this fashion, coming across the skin this way. I think I got it all. Yeah. There we are. Let me see. I'm sure somebody said something by now. Go to live chat. Okay. Don't drink it for the taste. It's back to the energy drinks. Life is bad for you. I agree. Feels good. Embarrassing you start poetry. Favorite poems. A-Day for you Canadianists. I think it's still called Armistice Day in most of the UK. I'm not 100% sure. The unofficial state bird of the mosquito, because they're everywhere. Oh, gods, yeah. If you think mosquitoes are bothersome, you should experience sandflies. If you've ever been anywhere where there's black fly is pretty bad too. Glue I wouldn't have the problems I have with this glue if I had clamped it properly. I made a mistake and clamped upside down. If I had clamped it the right way, never would have been an issue. What do we got going on here? Safety third. Not sure what that's referring to. Electrician scissors. Small, heavy-duty cut copper wire. Use them for everything these days. Oh, yeah, no. Anything that can cut copper wire is probably not going to be sharp enough to really get a good edge. Oh, my knife is over here. Just a second. One of the big reasons to use one of these is because when the tip gets dull, you can actually, and I'll just show you, know these seams, right? They just snap off. You immediately have a brand new fresh razor blade. Unless you're an idiot who runs their blade out like this and uses the whole thing all at once. That's just dumb. That's not what it's for. These are for cutting. Generally about there is a good height. I usually go about there if I'm doing something really, really fine, like say cutting less than a 1/16 of an inch of plastic. And always make sure your blades are locked closed when you're putting them in your pocket, especially if you're anything like me where your pocket points directly at your crotch. What else have we got said here? Oh, there we are. Zipping back down, safety, scissors. Next project, a slide mount for the camera. Probably not, because I like, it's not an actual camera, it's basically an iPad sized tablet. It's an Android. reason that I don't want a different slide, I do have a pretty good mount as it is. It's just a question of paying attention to the angles I'm actually recording at. And generally, I don't do a lot of, or I haven't planned to do a lot of really fine work. What I was more planning to do was to kind of have the camera up about here uh, with my table over here and just show you the entire process from a little bit greater distance. Let's see, next part, yeah. Kingdom of Inland says Alaska has a state song, or states have national anthems. That, in my opinion, is good enough to be a national anthem if Alaska was independent. The song is called Alaska's Flag. Newfoundland has a former national anthem as well. It's called the Ode to Newfoundland, which I think is an absolutely beautiful song. Um, if you go looking for it, uh, there is a very bad version online, which, for whatever reason, is the version that they use on our televisions. It's absolutely terrible. Uh, but just reading the lyrics is enjoyable enough. Twist the back end to give you pressure so it's easier to squeeze and control flow. Yeah, that's what I should have been doing. But it wasn't. Oh no, it's Gorilla. I don't use Elmer's. Why chisel instead of razor blade? Because once it's hard, what you want to do is chisel. For example, if you're working on a vertical and horizontal intersection surface, you want to chisel down first and then chisel in. Because what'll happen is it won't be peelable. It's basically crystallizing. Let me see if I can get a hold of this. Right along here, see how very golden and crystalline that is? That is rock hard. There's no peeling that. You have to chip it off. If you have a glue that you can peel when it's set, then you don't have a glue that's good for structural work. Anything that's meant to stay together, other than, say, paper. If you're gluing paper and you use the same glue on wood and discover that the glue, once it's supposed to be set, is something that you can peel, it will not hold your glue to your wood pieces together. This stuff, the way it's engineered these days, what happens is, yeah, I love Gorilla Glue products. I generally use them all the time. Yeah, I believe Vinland just said something about Alaska's state song again. I'd like to get your opinion on. Okay, yeah, I was just going to say send it to me on Discord. Let me see. Yeah, Earl, you were definitely right. That's how I should have handled the piping bag. I'm not a cook. I can cook. Not a great one. I think I'm a half decent cook, but I think I'm half decent as a cook because I'm a little more adventurous than a lot of people tend to be with cooking, which means I make some massive, wonderful mistakes. And some of them are, well, let me put it to you this way. My mother was the person who gave me the best advice about cooking. When you're teaching yourself to cook something new, uh, make it when no one else is around, and if it turns out to be absolute crap that even you can't eat, throw it away and start over, or just make something else. I have a suspicion you guys are getting some buffering at this point. Still didn't get him. Okay. I saw Earl say something about chicken and dumplings. I think he said he was making chicken and dumplings. Chicken and dumplings, yeah. As Just to go back to the Gorilla Glue thing as well, there are a couple of different types of Gorilla Glue these days. Gorilla makes a great wood glue, which is what that is. But there's also the, I guess, original Gorilla Glue, which is the stuff that you have to use a little bit of water with. For instance, if you were gluing together, say, two flat wooden surfaces, or a wooden surface and what did I use? Gorilla? Oh, two plastic surfaces. Okay. I'll get to that in just a second, Kingdom. So if you're gluing two surfaces together, say metal and metal, which I wouldn't recommend, but then again, I'm no metallurgist. But I was attaching a grip to a phone case for a friend of mine. And what I did was use Gorilla Glue on the case itself and take a bit of wet rag and run across the piece I was attaching to it. And then I think I put a couple of books on that for weight. What happens is the original Gorilla Glue will expand in the presence of water and sets, and it is extremely solid. Fun fact, Alaska has the most pilots per capita. A lot of bush pilots up there. I could see that. Alaska is an awesome state. Are either of you guys actually from Alaska? Kingdom, I think, is from Texas, if I recall correctly. I'm not sure about Earl. From the pictures I've seen, quite possibly the most naturally beautiful state in the U.S. Uh, you talking about the two-part epoxy there, Earl? From the pictures I've seen, quite possibly most natural. You know, a lot of North America has very similar terrain. There are parts of Newfoundland. Oh, Alabama. Okay. Uh, but a lot of Newfoundland has very similar terrain to Alaska or British Columbia. The only difference being that Newfoundland's terrain is much older, much more eroded. So our hills aren't as tall as your mountains. Uh, and because we have really poor soil, our forests are nowhere near as tall. Um, Ironically, I chose to be a woodworker in this area. Really starting to think I should have been carving sandstone. My folks visited Texas a few years before my father passed away, and they went all the way out to the end of the line in Homer and talked to some guys on a fishing boat because my dad and me actually for some time. My father actually grew up as a fisherman, commercial fisherman, and also did it himself as a business when he was older, which is when I did it with him. Uh, okay, yeah, yeah. I like I say, I don't know metalwork, um, which isn't to say I wouldn't like to learn smithing. But my folks went out to Homer, Alaska, spoke to a fishing crew, and it turned out three of them were Newfoundlanders. We're fucking everywhere. Which is why I don't mind the idea of moving to Texas, because if all else fails, I'll go to Corpus Christi and get a job on a fishing boat. They have tapped that one down too far. But um, with yeah, I wouldn't mind going to Alaska at all. Certainly, um, though I'm not a big fan of cold, so I'd have to go in the very peak of summer. And I would want to knock down an Alaskan moose and have some food. Uh, Mobile, Alabama, do the same mesh of fishing there. Yeah, they fish like shrimp and stuff. Yeah, that's right. Alabama's between. Let me see if I've got my American geography right. Alabama is the state between Mississippi and Georgia. Is that right? Alabama's got an ocean coast, right? I've probably got that horribly wrong, but I know it goes Louisiana, Mississippi, and I think it's Alabama, Georgia, Florida, if I'm right. So Texas, Louisiana, uh, and touches Florida. Okay, so I had that backwards. It's Georgia, Alabama, Florida. Okay. Gulf of Mexico. Okay, excellent. Yeah. There's actually a warm current that comes up from the Gulf of Mexico called the Gulf Stream. Comes up along your east coast, and that's actually why our summers are mild and our winters are, or our summers are warm-ish, and our winters are fairly mild, because we get the tail end of that. We also get the tail end of pretty much every hurricane you guys experience. What else is going on today? If I was living in Alaska, I'm thinking I'd like to be a bush pilot. It would be awesome to see the aurora borealis. Yeah, I've seen the aurora from, well, actually from my driveway, which is an extreme rarity. But when I lived in Alberta, sometimes, some nights, I mean, the sky was just alight. There were a couple of times I looked up, and the way the aurora was hitting, it was very round, and I described it to a friend of mine as almost like looking God in the eye. Alabama and Florida basically touch tips. Hot summers, mild winters. Well, yeah, you guys don't get any real amount of snow at all, I wouldn't imagine. Do y'all get nor'easters up in Newfoundland? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we get nor'easters. Um, we get nor'easters, we get Yankee Clippers, and we get, uh, oh, what's the other one called? In Labrador, they get Chinook every now and again as well, which is a very rare thing in Labrador as well. Um, what else have I got going on here? So that gluing is done. As I said at the top of the show, or top of the stream, there's been some bad news. Oh, what was this? Sharknadoes. We do have sharks in the water, and we do occasionally get water spouts. So a sharknado is potentially not out of the question. Although I do think sharks have the good sense to make like a tree and leaf when the water gets churny. Uh, yeah, there's not a lot else going on today. So anyway, as I was saying, the bad news off the top of the stream was that I won't be able to do that project for Christopher Everard after all. If you guys happen to read French, which I doubt, but if you do, go and check out his books. What little I could understand was very interesting. Oh, thanks, Kingdom. He says he sent me his favorite version of Alaska's flag on Discord. Um, yeah. Unfortunately, I won't be able to do that project for Christopher. On the upside, and I always try to find an upside, that means that I have 16 feet worth of juniper. I wish. 16 feet worth of cedar that I can make stuff with. So I will probably make, I don't know yet, for what else I would do, but there are a few lengths that are absolutely pristine that I will probably end up making some bouquin out of. As I was saying, I'm going to see about getting some good spruce boards and look into purchasing a bandsaw again so I can do some resawing so that I can do some laminating of boards and make. Um, Unfortunately, this is red cedar, not the aromatic stuff, so it doesn't smell the same. To me, it actually smells kind of like really oniony mustard, uh, almost like Dijon. Uh, but uh, I will probably end up laminating and making some bouquin, which sad face. uh, yeah, it's it's not an unattractive smell, but it's not exactly uh, particularly appealing. So I'm not really looking forward to cutting it and ending up burning it either amount. So far, I've only cut it with a handsaw, and it is very pungent. Heart pine to do a project with myself. So is that pine heartwood or? Let's see. I hope there's a sort of boom of localized French comics in the U.S. after a company starts doing localization. I'm thinking of at least hoping it would be like the anime explosion in the 90s. The bande dessinée style of artwork is really nice. And from what I understand from following Razor Fist, a lot of it is actually really well told. Um, if I recall correctly, he did mention there was some Conan uh, bande dessinée, and I'm a big Conan fan, so I would love to read those books. Let's see. The idea I had for a flute for my buddy, which is going to be this. Uh, I've been talking to him, and he's looking for something with a bit of a higher pitch So I'm going to be putting a very small hole in these, probably 1/4 inch at the most, or in this. But the style of mouthpiece is going to be very important. I don't want to just drill a straight hole through and end up with a tube, because all you'll get then will be not exactly a good sound for a flute. So I will be looking at some shapes. I'm thinking a recorder style mouthpiece would be best. So he'll end up with a fairly small, probably 6 holes total. Well, you can see I'm holding 4 there and 2 there. So yeah. Uh, yeah, so it's pine heartwood. Is able to reclaim 8-inch boards from an old 2-story car warehouse from the 50s. I imagine those are frigging heavy as hell and good and solid. Uh, the grain pattern in that is probably beautiful as well. One of the things I like when I get the chance to work with reclaimed wood is the grain pattern is generally just absolutely gorgeous. And uh, that pattern, the grain pattern in really old wood is generally very spread out, which makes it significantly stronger. Um, Plus, anything that was made out of wood before 1980, if it says 2x4, it's actually 2x4. It's not this 1 3/4 or 1 5/8 or whatever it is by 2 3/4 or 1 3/4 or 3 3/4. It's actually the size it says it is. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure why they ever changed that. Um, but I believe it was probably along the lines of, it was probably something along the lines of shrinkage, where if you cut a fresh board to 2 inches by 4 inches, with the amount of moisture it will lose, you're really looking at 1 3/4 by 3 3/4 when you're finished. Um, what else have I got going here? So yeah, I'll be. I did want to talk about the bowcan a bit more because that's one of my pet projects. I've got an interest in medieval swordsmanship and swordsmanship in general. I've talked about that before, but the reason I'm looking at making bowcan is because what I'm planning to make is not actually going to be curved the way an Asian sword is. It'll be straight. I keep meaning to one that I have that I've made, but I keep forgetting, and I don't really want to let it sit in the shed for fear that it might warp. Though it shouldn't, it's lacquered. So, but uh, what I want to make is not exactly a waster, because I certainly don't want people to waste these, but uh, essentially a practice sword. The one I've made is from a fairly soft material. 4-wheeler. 4-wheeler sounds like it needs a little engine work. Anyway, um, the bowcan that I'm trying to make is basically going to be longsword, and by longsword I mean proper medieval term longsword. So it's a two-handed sword with a fairly significant blade. Uh, I don't plan to put crossguards on them. Uh, these are more going to be for form and uh, technique practice more than anything else. As I was saying, the one I've made is made from white birch, which, fun fact, actually smells like wintergreen when you start stripping it of bark, so it smells kind of like toothpaste. Um, but that wood is significantly softer than I thought it would be when it was dry, because birch is one of those in-between woods, which is generally considered a softwood, but is harder than most softwoods. Uh, but the plan is to make a few of those and make them available for sale. There is a growing medieval martial arts community here in Newfoundland. It's mostly focused in St. John's, of course. Most things are. But I'm hoping that that will go somewhere. Let me check for chats here in just a second. Very old pine. Oh, okay. Are BD a thing in Canada? I'd imagine they might be due to having to know both English and French Canadian. Quebec should probably be independent. No, Quebec should probably be subdued. I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, BD, yeah, bande dessinée. No, they're not very common here either. Oh, hi, Farnell. How you doing? It's good to see you. Thanks for the sub yesterday, by the way, or the day before. I don't know. I'm terrible at keeping track of these things. But certainly thanks for stopping by. It's good to have the support of everybody. Let's see. Hate all new woodcuts from factories. Changed for dollars. It very well may have. Back in the 70s, 80s, the tree hugging crowd really got a little crazy, and what used to be, as far as I can understand, a fairly sustainable system, of course, the government decided to get involved and fix. We know how that works out. A Zweihänder. No, it won't be to the point of a great sword. Uh, how to explain the difference? Zweihänders generally are at least as tall as the person holding them. Long swords tend to be about chest height, up to your armpit usually. Um, and Zweihänders tend to have a great, massive handle on them because you have to get so much torsion on them. Quebec being independent would probably be less of a headache. I don't agree. I really think that if Quebec wants to enjoy the benefits of being in Canada, they should stop threatening to leave. And they should stop demanding special treatment. They should also stop the deceptive, oh, we're a have-not province. Fuck off. Let me see. Could you use yellow pine for some waster practice swords? Decent hardness, not too pricey in most places. Yellow pine probably would be a waster. What I'm wanting to make is something that could handle moderate to heavy contact. Hand and a half swords or bastard swords. Yeah, I could. But the idea being that because longsword tends to be the most popular, and tends to line up the best with katana in terms of technique, because they're both two-handed, almost exclusively two-handed for technique. I prefer to go that route. I do have a katana boken that I used for the baseline model of the piece that I made. The biggest problem with the piece that I did make is that it's too thin. From blade to edge, it's about an inch, and part of the reason that happened was because I had a very young tree that needed substantial trimming to get to where I needed it to be. Unfortunately, such is life. What else did I miss? Hand and a half swords, bastard. Yeah, that'll be down the line. And honestly, my personal preference for a sword is, and people absolutely hate me for this, I like the ninja toe. I know it's a Hollywood invention, but they inadvertently invented something that I absolutely love because it's perfect for me. I'm not a particularly tall person. I don't have a particularly large reach, but I can grapple like nobody's business. And having a short, two-handed weapon that gives me that ability to be very, very agile definitely attracts me if I'm going the Asian route. Longsword is also my personal choice. Battle axe. Well, battle axe is always an option. I don't think I'd make one out of wood. I do have a couple of hickory handles, axe handles, and sledgehammer handles that I'm planning to turn into essentially a practice fencing set. Gladius, just classic bearded axe. I do like the bearded axe. You're talking about the Danish beard, I assume. I do like that for a weapon because it's the sort of thing you can choke up on. A war pick, it's extremely easy to make a war pick. Just go out and buy the average pick that someone would use for, say, digging up their garden or whatever. And really, you're just reshaping that. You can make a war pick out of a hammer, for that matter, if you happen to know a smith who's willing to do the work for you, or you're willing to do it yourself. I do know what you mean, though. You mean something custom, and I absolutely agree. A pick would be a very... No, still didn't get them. Pick would be a very handy weapon to have. Okay, I'm going to finish half of this bar here now and wrap up the rest of it. Shouldn't have done that. I'm going to ruin my dinner. But I mostly wanted to get that sealed up so the fly doesn't get in there. What's going on? There we are. When all else fails, nail on a board. You know, there's a reason that improvised weapons are a thing. I do want a, what did he say here? A high carbon steel Damascus war pick. I take it the Damascus part of that is just for the looks, because Damascus is a beautiful material when it's worked well. I can see where you're coming from there. Personally, I'd like to get a Viking style sword like an Ulfberth. I was actually watching a piece about the Ulfberth the other day or Ulfbert, that was on, I think, History Channel or something like that. I'm not a big fan of the Viking style grip. I don't like having to hammer fist things. And that's the way the Viking grip is meant. It's meant to basically, when you close your hand tight, it locks your hand in place, so you're basically just doing this. I'm a bit more of a fencer type, so I like to have that loose grip. Some smithing and electrical, awful at handles. The handles are fairly easy, actually. Get yourself a rasp and some round stock and just teach yourself how to do that shaping. You know, if you're aiming for, say, that flattened octagon shape, it's really just mark where you want those lines to be and then carve away everything else. I highly recommend a wood rasp. It's one of the easiest tools to use, and it's pretty forgiving. Oh, decorative wise, yeah, I mean, a lot of my work, it looks pretty when it's finished, but I very much let form follow function. Uh, if I build something, I build it first to be sturdy and reliable, and second for its looks. Uh, Now, that said, if I'm building something that I know is going to be visible at all times, like, say, a set of cabinetry, I will go out of my way to pick good-looking grain for the front pieces. Uh, Presentation grain is important when you're doing something like that. It should look beautiful, because if you're going to spend, well, let's be honest, if you're buying actual proper cabinetry, you're looking at $20,000 for a relatively average a new lathe or a quality anvil and blast furnace. Trying to make handles on a lathe, I would advise against, because what you'll end up with will be rounded, and that'll be prone to slipping in your hand. Oblong, ellipsoids, things like that. Those are really the shape you want to go with for a sword handle. Take a look at, say, the average katana grip, or if you find someone who does really good historical sword building. What are the guys? Ilya and Baltimore Knife and Sword. those guys are actually really good at the shape of the handle. Um, I've purchased swords, excuse me, in the past, Mall Ninja stuff, and it's been totally round. And the first time I try to swing it, it's almost impossible to keep the alignment, the blade alignment, where you want it. Grip tape for Baki stuff. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but even with a leather wrap, if you're putting a leather wrap on a round surface, it's still going to be rounder than it needs to be. And uh, I mean, a lot of those old grips and things, they were never really round. Um, I think there's the Sword of Charlemagne is a fairly ceremonial thing in, I can't remember if it's the Leeds Armory or the Tower of London, and that may be the same thing. But that piece, even though it was made completely ceremonial, if you look at the handle, that handle is made to be gripped, and it's made to basically lock into your hand. The ergonomics of it. Basically, the handle should be shaped not unlike your top two fingers, flipped. So you're basically getting the widest grip up here and then down on the bottom of your hand because your fingers are smaller. You have a bit of a wedge shape, and it's very. Ow, hang on. Oh, pop those two knuckles anyway. Uh, but it's very difficult to lose that grip because you have what's essentially semi-rectangular with the rounded edges for comfort. Um, trying to think. Okay, here's a good example actually for ergonomic grip, which is funny because this is a very cheap saw. But you can see the shape of the grip here is right a flattened oblong, and it's very much resisting twisting in my hand to the point that I'm probably going to damage the saw if I keep doing that. There we go. I'm actually over an hour. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. I appreciate the company. Let me see what else is going on here. Elongated oval. Yeah, good choice. Only spears and flails were round. Even flails probably shouldn't have been round. And one of the oh gods, one of the terrible things I see with a lot of flails, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this as well. You're holding the flail by the very end of the handle, and the ball is here, or here, or here, or worse, down here. Um, do that. Right? Terrible. Absolutely terrible. A lot of flails depicted in artwork, especially, were generally depicted properly. Um, it seems to be something that people have realized over the years is that a lot of those Vikings with muskets, oh good God, no, would make fixed bayonets one of the most terrifying things you could hear. The bounce back, yeah, that's. I mean, I absolutely agree with Shadowversity about nunchucks. They're garbage. Right? But again, we're looking at an improvised weapon that was something that was probably meant to be used for sneak attacks and to get around. Let's call them unfortunate laws. Uh, but again, I really do like. I mean, there's nothing cooler than Bruce Lee whipping those chucks around. Let's get serious about that. But as an actual weapon, I don't think they're likely to be that effective. Uh, Certainly not as effective as good old stick. There's a reason that almost all of our weapons look like stick in some way, shape, or form. Ye old loophole. Yeah. Um, yeah. A lot of weapons, up until fairly recently, probably the last 15, 20 years, a lot of recreated medieval weapons were they were recreated by people who hadn't made or hadn't benefited from serious study of the material of the history. Um, so, for example, that sword that I bought, the Mall Ninja sword that I had bought, which was badly modeled on a Cass Iberia hand and a half sword, which is still one of my favorite designs. Uh, but it was basically modeled on that, but the handle was perfectly round and perfectly tubular. And the first time I swung it, what happened was the blade came down like this because I could actually get the edge alignment right. But when it came down, it went like this and went sideways. So my cut was absolute garbage. I remember, I believe it was an apple I was trying to cut, and the cut began perfectly fine, but within half an inch, it had basically become horizontal, and I was smashing the bottom part of the apple with the flat of the blade. About 3 years ago, one of my friends purchased a blade from a more reputable smith, and was nice enough to act as pitcher with some apples for me. And that was was it a Langmesser? The German one was the name. Yeah, it was a Langsmesser. Uh, and cutting with that thing was totally night and day. Plus, you have guys like Gus Trim or Angus Trim. I'm not sure which he goes by. Who was actually a friend of mine on Facebook before I left Facebook. Uh, and he kind of made distal taper a bit of a meme, but it's also historically accurate. Um, what I would like to have would be something akin to the Venetian town guards cut and thrust sword or side sword, where it's got a fairly swept fencing style hilt, but a much broader, heavier blade than a rapier, uh, but is just as agile because of distal taper as a rapier. So you can actually do a lot of those nifty fencing moves. Let me see here. What else? Did I miss anything? Talking about Quebec. Change. Yeah, the change in. Um, oh my. The change in the sizing of wood. Yeah, it probably did come down to economic issues. Uh, there was the whole hippie tree hugger thing in the early 80s. Um, but even before that, the price of wood in Europe was getting high because a lot of those forests were being, well, deforested. And this is where a lot of materials like plywood, oriented strand board, which is the stuff that's on the wall behind me. Uh, anyway, um, but oriented strand board, plywood, and certain laminates, but also what's called particle core and MDF and HDF. Now, MDF and HDF are extremely heavy. It's a good structural thing. You can put some really beautiful stuff over it. If you get hardwood veneer, for instance, if you book match it and do parquet work, it looks phenomenal. And it almost always will if it's maintained even a little, because MDF and HDF, because there's resin and wood fiber in it, is extremely dimensionally stable. And dimensional stability is talking about things like warp and twist. So I'm coming up on an hour 10. So I did intend this to be a fairly short one because all I had to do today was do that bit of gluing. If the weather is good tomorrow, when I'm done with Sultans, I will do another stream just to do the cutting with the table saw. And I think we've talked about that before, Kingdom. Yeah, the Royal Canadian Air Force could have had the F-14 Tomcat. Um, you have to realize, though, there's still a significant anti-American animus in a lot of people. Oh, I've got 5 viewers, and now I got 3. uh, yeah, you guys can keep me talking all day because I do love to talk. I like conversation very much. I did just see your Vikings with muskets thing again, and I am going to revisit that in just a second. But like I say, if tomorrow after Sultans, if the weather is good and I'm feeling up to it, I will be taking the candle holder and running on the table saw just to flatten out all the lengths. And then all I have to do after that is get the glue, the excess glue off, probably do a little bit of sanding, and then drill and possibly sand the interior of the holes. I may not, because unsanded they would hold far better if you put candles in them. Just to show you the candles I'm talking about, that's these guys. These are little column candles. I picked red because I think red will look best with that wood, especially mahogany. Just to show you what I'm talking about here. So that's more or less what it would look like put together. I think it'll be pretty. But to go back to the Vikings with muskets, I don't think Vikings with muskets would be quite as cool. However, because of the Vikings' very extensive trading network and far traveling nature, it is not out of the realm of possibility that were you writing, say, historical fiction, you couldn't set a story in the Mediterranean with a Viking with a hand cannon, a Chinese style hand cannon. Um, if I recall correctly, and I generally do when it comes to history, the Chinese were extremely secretive about the recipe for gunpowder. Um, and because of that, the likelihood would be that the Vikings could steal every hand cannon they could get their hands on, but if they aren't already loaded, they won't necessarily know what they're doing. So you could end up with some interesting Viking pyrotechnics. What else have we got? Anything? Yeah, the F-14 tank. That was the electric jet, right? The one they had in Top Gun. Um, yeah. Uh, don't really want to get into a discussion about jets again today. What else have we got going on here? Go all the way back to the beginning of chat here. Odyssey is good stuff. Yeah, I'm going to shill my Odyssey again, guys. Uh, if you watch my stuff on replay, I'd appreciate it if you did it on Odyssey and threw me a credit or two. Uh, those are, in fact, seagulls you hear, yes. That'll be seagulls and probably some crows. One of my neighbors decided it was a good idea to start feeding them. What are they flying in Maverick in the new Top Gun? I haven't seen that yet. I'm guessing it's not F-14s. Is it the F-35? Um, while I'm waiting for the lag to catch up. Yeah, those are crows and seagulls. One of my neighbors decided it was a good idea to. Oh, yeah. Please like and share and subscribe and comment and all that stuff. If you happen across any porn spam bots, two pieces of advice. One, report them. Two, if you're really that desperate for a woman, go to a bar. Um, Other than that, guys, I'm pretty much done. I'll check for that response. Yeah, there's uh, talking about the Vikings with muskets thing again. F-18 Super Hornets. Okay, I'll have to go and look at those. Uh, but well, I'm probably going to watch Maverick at some point. Is it out for streaming yet? The hell have I done there? I always love when I find a mystery injury. Anyway, oh, that's another thing with woodworking. Depending on the species, if it's particularly exotic, like say bloodwood, or I think there are some species of ebony, Macassar especially, that when you're working with them, you pretty much want to keep all of your skin covered, or at least one of my better than the original. Okay. F-30. I thought I'd seen an F-35 in one of the trailers. But if you're working with exotic woods, a good way to keep from getting yeah, squirrel. But a good way to keep from getting skin irritation, because a lot of exotic woods will give you skin irritation as well as lung irritation. Wear your filter masks. Um, but a good way to keep from getting skin irritation, which one of my former employers suggested, is to get a bottle of moisturizer and apply it very, very liberally. Uh, Avoid the pads of your hands if you can. Uh, Try to use gloves where you can. Um, Again, no, missed them again. But again, if you're working with an exotic wood, you know, make sure to mask up, because God only knows what you'd end up with for lung problems. I made a mistake a few years ago, which I think is where a lot of my lung issues come from. That I worked some unknown wood, which I did enjoy the smell of, uh, and then discovered that the wood I was working had actually come from a Chinese pellet. So I had no idea what species it was. Uh, and I did find that I was getting blistering on the insides of my forearms. Uh, but as I say, a fairly liberal amount of skin cream moisturizer helps create that moisture barrier that'll prevent that. Let me see. Okay, yeah, I think I'm done for the day, guys. So yeah, come watch Sultans of Chatelet tomorrow, 10:30 Newfoundland time. And as I said, after that, I will hopefully be doing a short stream of me doing the cutting and cleaning. Other than that, I will be doing my own Ask Ardent stream on Sunday at 11:30. Cool. Yeah, I miss having open fires under full moons, especially when the weather is good. Uh, Other than that, I've got my stream on Sunday, so that'll be 11:30 to 12:30 ish Newfoundland time. I've got, I think, one or two Canadian news stories that I will look at. Um, I'm going to be risking the wrath of YouTube again with that, because it's about the coof. But yeah, so we'll do a little bit of investigation into a story. See if we can't debunk some of the Canadian government's bullshit. Excellent. I look forward to it. And I appreciate the support, Earl. It's definitely something I do want to be thankful for. Other than that, guys, I think that's it. And oh, actually, one last thing I did want to talk about. Kept myself awake way longer than I meant to last night watching. What was the movie? Oh, good gods! I wanted to talk about it. Now I forgot what the movie was. Wasn't a western, was it? Good Christ! Oh well, that went right out of my head. Anyway, you guys take it easy. Hope you have a good day. I'm hoping, because it's been a couple of weeks, so we're going to have a fair bit to talk about. Other than that, I hope you guys are doing well, and I will talk to you guys later. Okay, rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Yes, I do want to stop streaming. Thank you, YouTube.